And welcome to the One More Thing podcast. Today I'm joined with Dr. Troy Doucet. How you doing this morning?
Man, everything's good. Thanks.
So another excellent weekend. This Reel series has been amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Just been really enjoying. And I know, Larry, this is your first time speaking within the series.
Yes.
So you came ready. You came creative. You were throwing different things at the creative team left and right.
Yeah.
So it was great. I wanted to start off with giving a little bit of background on the red and blue jelly beans that you passed out. Because that was kind of a game time decision. You're like, I think I want to do this.
That's right.
And so you ordered the little bags on Amazon.
Jelly bellies.
And so just a little bit of background, Troy and who else was helping you?
So Brett did like 120 of those and gave up the ghost. He was like, my fingers hurt, man.
Yeah.
And then Pastor Kevin and I did the rest of those. And
it's a labor of love.
Oh, it was, man. Because it went well with the clip. It went well. It gave like a visual, sort of illustrative idea of like, hey, today's going to be sort of this decision day.
Right.
Are we going to keep believing these sort of suspicious and possibly dangerous ideas about what the life of a church should be about, or are we going to take that red pill and go deep into the heart of what God, I think, is really about, man? So
I think illustrations like that make things and ideas more memorable.
Yeah.
Just in my experience in church, like when you have something tangible, physical that people can take away from it, it just helps kind of put those ideas and just anchor them a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
So why the red and blue pill? Why the Matrix scene? Like what kind of inspired you to go that direction? Because yours was real people, right? The tagline for your talk in the series.
Well, the Matrix sort of builds its storyline on the notion that there is a real world that exists, and then there's this Matrix, and the real world, for all of it's very lackluster of what we see, and I could see that everywhere on social media. The matrix of the social media is my life is perfect. This is what I can only post things that sort of allude to the fact that my life is in line and has everything in order. That's that blue pill, man. Like we want to believe that, but the red pill sort of opens up the possibility of what the real world is. It doesn't have the luster or the filters of the Matrix, but it's more authentic. And in that, man, we find our true self. And that's what the whole story of the Matrix is to find the true self, find the hero within you.
Yeah.
Because it's not based around false pretenses. It's based around this authenticity.
Right. So it's, and I think the movie perfectly coincides with this idea, right?
Yeah.
For anybody that hasn't seen the movie, like it's when they take that red pill and they decide to exit the Matrix and live within what is true reality.
Yeah.
It's kind of crap. Like it
starts that way.
It's tough because they're in this like terrible situation to where they're trying to figure out what's going on and how to truly liberate themselves from this AI and this Matrix, and they, I guess, spoiler alert in 3, 2, 1. They eventually do.
They do.
But it's a tough challenge once you've decided to make that.
But it's a beautiful sort of metaphor.
Yeah.
And that's why the text of James was important. He goes, the law of love is freedom. It's freedom. Whereas, again, I'm not trying to criticize anyone else's churches. Our church gets criticized enough.
A lot.
But there is a freedom that exists when I understand the heart of God as being absolutely and radically inclusive of all people.
Yeah.
And that in itself is a hard truth for some people to swallow, using the pill analogy.
Yeah.
To say, wait, what you're telling me is that all of this stuff I believed about the Bible, the historicity of the Bible, the authorship of the Bible, the doctrines and covenants and the creeds that have been created throughout the history of the church, some of these are man-made, like the machines in the Matrix.
Yeah.
Yes. And the thing that man made is consuming you.
Right.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Freedom comes from taking that red pill and beginning the journey to see this is how freedom hurts. Freedom is painful. Real freedom is really painful.
Yeah.
Because you have to look back. But if you watch The Matrix, there are people in The Matrix who've been freed who like, I want to go back.
I want to choose to
I
go
want
back.
to go back.
Yeah, yeah.
And that happens in
Yeah.
anything because I cannot deal with absolute freedom.
Sure.
And that's the law of Christ. Is the law of Christ is we are free because we are loved. We are not free to go be people who take license to harm others. We are freed people, free people, man. And that's the essence of Christianity.
Yeah.
You're not freed to go and do whatever you want to do. Now I can go sin in whatever word I want to use. No, that's ridiculous.
Right.
You're freed for something. You're freed for freedom of others.
Right.
And I think that's the beauty of James's text, and that what we try to do is talk about inclusivity, talk about unity, talk about mystery. And all of those things are counterintuitive to the more evangelical, conservative point of view of the scriptures. And you have guys who will vehemently defend that position. And I respect them, dude. Love many of them. But I'm like, come have a beer with me.
Yeah.
And let's really talk. Like,
Right.
let's talk.
Well, I don't think they've done the intellectual work to kind of. I mean, some of these guys haven't even been presented with an actual like intellectual conversation of an
Right.
opposing view. They always go after the straw man arguments,
Yeah.
you know, and so it doesn't really challenge their views a whole lot. But I think it is important, and I think more and more, like, I mean, you see it all the time. Like we were talking about it this morning, that, you know, there's so many churches that have like inclusivity on their website.
Yeah.
But do they really live by that?
Yeah.
Are they truly inclusive?
Yeah.
If two men or two women walked in holding hands saying they were married, are they gonna welcome them into their church,
Yeah.
or are they gonna feel very? Is that couple going to feel very unaccepted
That's
in that
right.
church?
And I mentioned that in the sermon.
Yeah.
A church that I won't name that I'd resigned from had a same-sex couple come in, two women, and they sat down toward the back. And I think one of them just kind of put their arm around. I put my arm around Esther.
Yeah.
In our church service.
Yeah.
And they were asked to leave
Yeah.
because apparently they were making others uncomfortable. And during that staff meeting, I'll never forget, I just went off.
Yeah.
I did the Will Smith thing. You know?
He smacked a couple people.
Smacked them around, man. Like, and the argument was, well, what if they would have began like doing inappropriate things, making out or whatever? And I'm like, then I would have responded to them the same way I would have responded to a heterosexual couple.
Right.
Like, cut that out. That doesn't belong here. But she had her arm around her. I see many husbands have their arms around their wives.
Sure.
In church. It's just it's affection,
Right.
you know, and it's not an inappropriate sign.
Yeah.
But the idea of inclusivity is one that I think it sounds nice. It sounds very Christian until you actually have to practice it.
Yeah.
And, you know, the boundaries that are created around that word, when you look at them, they're not very inclusive at all.
Sure. No, and we, in prepping for your sermon, we kind of had a couple of conversations, and I wanted to bring this up on one more thing.
Yeah.
So we talked about this idea of, yes, inclusivity and our call to love everyone, right? So what is the distinction between loving everyone and having everyone actually be a part of your life?
Yeah.
And so the example I used in our discussion was, what if you have somebody that's an alcoholic? They struggle with addiction, and they're in a better place to where they're living with their addiction, but they're making better choices for their life, trying to stay away from alcohol. But they have a friend that hasn't made that choice yet, and they're still struggling with alcohol. Does loving everyone mean that they have to keep that person in their life?
Yeah, it's a tough question.
Right.
There's a certain level of, and I use this word very loosely, a level of like toxicity that cannot be part of an integration in my life. Like if people cause me harm, when I exclude them from my life, I'm not being exclusive in a sense that I think is demeaning to that person's identity. What I'm trying to do is protect myself. Like I'm not inviting a serial killer into my home,
Right.
you know, to have a conversation about their crimes. Am I being exclusive in that point? Yes. For the sake of my own sort of
Protection.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it is. And I think that's just natural. There are people who, I think if we're excluding people on merits of being protective, that's one thing. To keep toxicity, to keep harm away. Look, dude, I don't care. Like, if you've harmed children in your past and you have a criminal record, you're not going to work with children. You might be welcome at our church, but you're not going to work with children. Am I being exclusive in that? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
There's a healthy type of exclusivity that I think is necessary.
Well, I think a better word than exclusivity is a boundary, right?
There you go.
And so to quote my wife, who is a therapist, and she deals with boundaries all the time, you know, just because you have put a boundary on an individual in your life doesn't mean that you are hating them.
That's right.
You know, our call is to love everyone.
That's right.
But it doesn't mean that you can't set a healthy boundary with an individual who seems to, whether inadvertently or advertently, tries to do you harm.
That's right.
So I think setting that healthy boundary of like, I love you, but your addiction makes me struggle more with my addiction.
That's right.
So I'm going to love you from afar. I'm going to set this boundary.
Right.
I'm not going to come meet you at a bar to hang out. I'm not going to have you come to my birthday party because you're just going to drink and it's going to trigger me, or it could potentially trigger me. So I'm just going to put this boundary, but I still love you.
Yeah, man.
You know? And so there's those healthy types of boundaries to where I think even just using that as opposed to like exclusivity,
yeah, I think that's absolutely a brilliant term.
Yeah.
Like I have friends who are Muslims, right? They identify within Islam traditions. They know where I stand in my critiques of Islam. Now, I'll be invited to have a conversation with them, but I won't be a regular speaker.
Yeah.
And I don't feel excluded by it because I'm not trying to integrate into that community. And if I was, it would be to do harm. You know, you dig what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If there's a Christian who's crying out, well, I'm excluded from Muslim, well, why do you want to be included in there? You're not there to help bring benefit to their belief, their ideology, their doctrines. You're there to probably undermine anything. Whereas someone who's a thinker, like, I would love to have conversations around that, but it's okay that I'm not invited back to speak on a regular basis.
Sure.
Right? That's a healthy boundary.
Right.
And when I see people who want to be included in the life of a church that may identify as Christian, and they're being excluded for some ideological reasons, not moral reasons, but ideological, doctrinal reasons, then that's when it's not a boundary. It is exclusivity.
Yeah.
It's different, you know, and if you're not smart enough to recognize that distinction, man, then I kind of feel sorry for you, you know, that there's a difference, like you said, between a boundary and exclusivity.
Yeah.
So.
No, and I think that was just something that I wanted to bring up because I think it's part of this whole thing, you know. It's like in this exploration of how to do this, and that leads me to my next line. This will be the last one. You stated how uniformity has been sought by churches over unity. Yeah. So expand on that just a little bit.
Yeah, and I'll actually build on this a little bit more this week when I'm up. We're talking about real talk, and the notion is this idea that is historical in most churches. I mean, denominations break off not because they feel they're going to do a better job. It's to try to create a more concrete sense of uniformity. And what that is like they're trying to get everyone to speak the same language, the same doctrines, the same sort of creeds, the same belief systems. You know, Methodists, for instance, you know, I worked at a Methodist church for a long time. Love what they're doing, love the wrestling that they're having about sexuality. But Methodists will baptize babies, right? They'll baptize babies. And they broke away from other traditions that would not. And they created a sense of uniformity around what baptism meant as a symbolic gesture. Nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
You know, Baptists, on the other hand, will not. They will not baptize babies. And again, that creates uniformity. That's for me, a very innocent distinction of creating uniformity. The danger in uniformity is when it becomes coercive,
right?
When shame is involved, and when fear-mongering takes place. In order for you to belong, you have to believe. And not only believe this, you have to sort of insulate yourself within the confines of this system. Otherwise, you're out, man. Otherwise, you're out. And we see this happening. Like, you don't have to do much Googling to find people within the Mormon tradition who say, I can't. The science seems to show like these tribes, these lost tribes of Israel that you claim are Americans didn't come from the Middle East. They came from Siberia, like DNA evidence points to that.
Right.
And when they question that, they're out.
Right.
That's sort of that insular process of uniformity. And it's dangerous, man. It's dangerous. We're not talking about should we baptize infants or adults.
Right.
We're talking about like getting to the heart of how a person identifies as a human being.
Right.
And if you don't speak our language, if you don't believe our doctrinal statements, then we may not kick you out, but you're going to be ostracized.
I was going to say, you're not going to be accepted. You're not going to feel included.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're going to be excluded. You're going to lose friends. And it's funny how that shape is not only within systems of belief, but just like patterns of life for churches. Like, you have some churches that a pastor like myself may go through a divorce and you've lost your calling.
Yeah.
What? Like, I understand I probably need to take a break and heal and learn and grow and mature. But bro, we're not reading the same Bible, because my Bible says that the gift and the calling of God is without any sort of repentance. That means God doesn't feel bad about giving me the gift of communication, right? Regardless of what I do. Now, there could be things I do that disqualify me from the position.
Right.
But that calling, that gifting will always still be there, even in light of that.
Yeah.
And shaming, man, like, the idea of like the moralization of like sexuality or just sex in and of itself has been one where, I just watched a documentary on a huge mega church where one of the things they did was they tried to control the sexual practices of people in the church. And if they found out you were having sex before marriage, you had to break up with this person.
Yeah.
You could not see this person. But maybe they were made for each other, and maybe they're operating outside the confines of your doctrinal position.
Sure.
But it doesn't mean they shouldn't be together. And they just created fear and shame and coercion, and it's just dangerous, man. It's dangerous. Let people be people. And if we make mistakes, that's where grace comes into play. But getting us all to look the same, to speak the same, to believe the same, that was attempted over and over historically.
Sure.
And those that achieved it, the powers that be rose up against it.
Yeah, it doesn't end well.
Yeah,
that's always, it works in the immediate term, but in the long run, it just doesn't work well.
That's right.
So, and I think one of your amazing abilities is to take these very difficult and complex ideas and simplify them for everyone you just make them palatable. And I think your story at the end was perfect.
Oh,
with the
old Abe there. Yeah.
Yeah. Abraham. You see on the outside, you guys probably just disagree about everything when it comes to God and religion. But you found this connection despite all of that. And I thought that was really great. It just kind of capped off the entire idea. And I know you had a lot of affirmation afterwards of just people telling you like that's exactly what they needed to hear today. So another amazing job.
Thanks, man.
And you're up again this weekend.
Yeah, real talk, man. So the power of not only like our tongue in spoken words, but we, in the same way like James's text this week was about social economic hierarchy, but we brought in, well, actually we discriminate on all sorts of levels, not just poor and wealthy. Same way, like we speak words, not just through our voice and tongue, but we write things. I can speak with body language.
Right.
And those things we have to take care in what we say and do and think, man. So it's going to be good.
That's awesome, man. Well, I can't wait. Thanks for being on.
Awesome. Thanks.